So a couple of months ago, I made a video about Charlottesville and the protest that turned into a riot, and the way that the media sort of almost created that particular segment of the alt-right that tends to march around with tiki torches and act very aggressive and do things that frighten the old ladies. Um, and I was thinking aloud as I was making the video and speaking, and it occurred to me that a lot of the ways that the media has shaped the conditions that led to the alt-right turning from sort of an intellectual movement before the election to just sort of a Yahoo free-for-all of repressed racial animosity, um, actually, ironically, is kind of related to the way that the media attacking young black males in the 1980s fed into gangster culture. Um, at that time, there was a lot of overt racism in the media towards young black men, and they to it by saying, well, fuck you. If you think we're monsters, we're going to be monsters then. And a lot of the racial and gender animosity that's been directed at white men in the past couple of decades has created a similar sort of very understandable knee-jerk reaction of, well, if you think we're all monsters and we're terrible just for being born, then fuck you, we're gonna march around with tiki torches and pretend to be Nazis or whatever it is they're pretending to be. Um, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was kind of begging the question, if we can't say anything nasty about them as a group without them becoming more rambunctious than society would like, are young men as a whole holding society hostage with their potential behavior? And the answer is, yeah, kind of. They have the ability to hold society hostage. Men are stronger than women, and there are some old guys who really stay in shape and are stronger than a lot of the young guys I know. But by and large, the rule is men also lose strength as they get older. Also, young people, young men in particular, are full of hormones that kind of won't let them take insults lying down. So you're looking at a group, whether you're looking at them race by race or whether you're looking at just the group of young men as a whole entity, you're looking at a group that is young, by definition, young and dumb. I mean, there is some wisdom in young people. I remember and being a lot more excited about my own ideas when I was younger than I am now, and having a lot of energy, but also lacking. You learn from experience, and when you lack experience, you just literally cannot have wisdom because you've got nothing but raw intelligence that hasn't had a maximum amount of data fed into it. Young people can be extremely bright, but wisdom is rare and usually only occurs in cases that have been abused so badly they can barely talk to you about it anyway. So, by definition, you're looking at a group that is not as wise as its elders, but has a lot more physical power and daring and ruggedness and ability to move and shake things than its elders. So, this is one of those things where it would be best if young, strong, vigorous people with little wisdom under their belts weren't able to hold society hostage. But kind of like death, it's one of those things that's there. So you need to sort of account for it when you're acting in society. And no, I'm not arguing against anyone's free speech. You can go on Tumblr and talk about how white men are the oppressor all you like, or you can go on your site and talk about how young black men are just inherently violent and therefore bad. But what you're going to get is groups of young men who find themselves being insulted for who and what they are, for things that they can't change about themselves. The only thing they can do is respond to it with anger and possibly violence. So yeah, young men kind of do hold society hostage in a way, and you should compensate for that before you open your mouth about how terrible men are. I realize this is what I'm saying is kind of a double-edged sword because I'm simultaneously saying that young men are kind of a disaster while saying you probably shouldn't say that young men are a disaster. But I hope I'm saying it with enough compassion that my intention comes through, which is to sort of cajole people to be a little bit more kind and understanding when it comes to young men. Because just because they're physically strong and capable and energetic doesn't mean that they're not actually emotionally vulnerable. And you you don't want to emotionally harm someone who's physically strong. It's like, you know, when if you're dealing with Hodor in Game of Thrones, he's not very bright, but he's very emotionally sensitive and he's very strong. You don't want to antagonize that guy. I mean, he maybe can take actually a little less teasing than the other characters. And if you push him to his limits, you're going to get your ass kicked. Wow, that was quite possibly the most condescending metaphor I could have ever come up with. Young men are Hodor. I'm just digging myself a deeper hole here. Okay, I'm not trying to say that they're all necessarily bad people. I'm just saying the same psychological forces that led to sort of toxic gangster rap culture are the same cultural forces that are driving some of the more, the less intellectual sectors of the alt-right. I mean, one really, of course, you can't go too far the other way. You can't completely coddle any group of people and tell them that they can do no harm. Good example of this, and also a good example of young men having the capacity to hold society hostage, is the migrant crisis in Europe right now. Some ridiculous percentage of the migrants coming into Europe are young men, not women, not children, not old men, but young men. And the results are an astonishing number of rapes and crimes, and like entire countries are being their criminal profile is being completely changed. Their landscape as a society is being completely changed just because you have a group of young men running amok. But these young men are not being told by the mainstream media that they're terrible people. They're being told that they're welcome and they're angels and they can do no wrong. And without some sort of social check on their behavior, especially in a society whose values that they don't agree with. I mean, this is kind of a strange example now that I think about it, because a lot of these young men spent their actual formative years in completely different societies, and now they're obviously having a wee bit of trouble adjusting to a completely different cultural atmosphere. But it does display their physical capacity for holding society hostage. I mean, women can't go out at night. Sweden used to be very safe for women. All of a sudden, there's pretty much a curfew. There are certain metro stops that Paris metro drivers refuse to stop at because they're afraid they'll be hurt or killed. And this is not old dudes doing this. This is not young women doing this. This is young men who, instead of being told that they're terrible, have been pushed too far in the opposite direction and are being told that they're welcome and they're wonderful and their culture is great, even though their culture is kind of insane from the point of view of the culture that they're in. Neither the young white men's culture in America, nor the young men's black culture in America has gotten quite to the point of holding the entire society hostage the way that young men are doing in Europe. But they both of these two groups in the United States, their situation has some things in common. There's a personalized, there's a group characteristic that's being held up for personal shame. You know, you're taking a group characteristic that people can't change and turning into a reason for personal shame. And nobody likes this. I don't like people telling me that I don't know anything because I'm over 40, but I'm not full of hormones that are telling me, that are constantly biting me in the ass, demanding that I not take no for an answer and not lie down and take it. Um, Young men are. And so, but as you see in Europe, on the other hand, if you give them absolutely no check on their behavior from society, you also get riotous, running amok behavior. So, as with all things, a wise way to deal with this segment of society is moderation. Um, don't tell them that they're awful people because of things that they can't change, but don't tell them that raping people is okay and they're only going to go to jail for a couple of years for it because they're oppressed and they don't understand. They understand. There are signs everywhere saying, you know, they're putting anti-rape bracelets on young Swedish women to tell them like don't rape these women, but they're doing it anyway because there are so few consequences. Whereas in the United States, you know, white men are being trashed for no matter what they do. Like they try to be anti-racist and they're being told you can't say you have a black friend. They're trying to be feminist and they're being told that's creepy. They try to be masculine and they're being told that's also creepy. So, you know, we have a real problem guiding young people lately. There's this, like, my generation, Generation X, were the opposite of coddled. We were yelled at, kicked around, you know, not taken into account, not asked our opinions about anything. And then a generation later, everything swung the other way, where everyone's a helicopter parent, and you know, kids are having their kids are having their parents come to college and help them get better grades, and they have safe spaces. Like, to effectively raise human beings, you need to have some kind of moderation in the culture that tells them, you know, you're okay. You're not a bad person just for being born, but you do have to earn your place in society by behaving in a civilized fashion, learning to make a living in a productive way, treating other people decently. Instead, either we tell them that they can do no wrong or we tell them that they can do no right. And then we're surprised when people end up fucked up. Um, so, in conclusion, just in case any of you kids are planning to come to my house and rape me because of something nasty I said in this video, look, you're not automatically good people. You're not automatically bad people. You need to find some way to learn to live in society. That took me a good long time. Hopefully you can find some sort of outlet or person that can help you find a shortcut. To the older people, don't coddle the kids and don't tell them they're evil. Because then you wind up with Charlottesville gangster rap and Sweden.